He never thought that a letter could change the course of his war. It didn't come from a general, nor from a strategic ally. It came from an old man, on the other side of the world. A man who grew flowers, slept among chickens, and spoke as if he had already died inside and come back to life just to let others know what was worth it. IBRAHIM Traoré opened the envelope with sweaty hands. Inside was a firm, yellowed sheet of paper. The first line read, "To the young man who still believes." Signed, José Pepe Mujica. There were no official seals, nor state coats of arms. Just the slow handwriting of someone who didn't write in a hurry, but with weight. The letter had crossed oceans and deserts. And now it rested on a simple table in a room in the barracks in Ouagadougou, where Traoré, head down, had been trying for weeks to support the country and himself. It was late afternoon, the sun spread like golden dust through the windows. The letter had arrived in the hands of an old messenger who barely spoke. He simply handed over the envelope with a slight nod, as if he knew the contents were not his, they were sacred. Traoré read in silence. The letter was not long, but each sentence seemed carved. Mujica did not use titles. He did not flatter. He didn't give compliments. He simply wrote as if he were extending his hand to someone on the edge of an abyss. "I know we've never met, Ibrahim," the second line said, "but I've heard your name blown on the wind. And when the wind speaks, I listen." He spoke about power, about the danger of becoming stone. He told of his cold nights in concrete cells, of the days when being human was a greater risk than dying. He reminded us that power was a mirror. Those who look too much forget their own face. "They will try to turn you into a statue," he said. "They will offer you gold with one hand and poison you with the other. But you must remain flesh. Keep your feet on the ground and your heart beating." Traoré stopped reading for a moment. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The letter seemed to have been written by someone who knew his innermost thoughts. The guilt he carried for every life he had lost. The fear of failure. The void between his decisions and his feelings. In the last line, Mujica left an invitation. "If one day the world suffocates you, come have a chimarrão with me. I still have some stories that might interest you." Traoré folded the letter delicately, as if it were glass. He put it in his uniform pocket. He said nothing to anyone. But that night, for the first time in weeks, he slept soundly. He dreamed of an open field. Of silence. Of an old man waiting for him, sitting on a wooden chair, with a cup in his hands and the steady eyes of someone who has seen the worst and still chose to plant flowers. The next morning, he ordered a trip to be prepared. Discreet. No flags. No ads. Just him, a notebook, and the letter. Because there was a conversation to be continued. And deep down, he knew, some battles are not won with weapons, but with words spoken at the right time, by voices that the world tries to forget, but that never fall silent. The room was dark, but the letter still shone in his memory. IBRAHIM Traoré had read each line as if it were a call. A voice coming from the depths of the earth, one of those that does not remain silent even when the whole world is making noise. And he knew, he had to go. There was no entourage. No flags. No speeches. The trip would be discreet. An almost clandestine crossing, not to avoid enemy eyes, but to maintain the essence of the gesture. This was not a diplomatic visit. It was something else. A reunion between two worlds that recognize each other without ever having touched. The flight left at dawn. The African sky still carried the hot dust of the last few weeks. Traoré was carrying very little. A notebook, a change of clothes, the letter. And a silence that was growing inside him, as if he were digging up something ancient. He landed in Montevideo under a sharp breeze. The cold was different, but the weight on his chest was the same. No one knew who he was at that moment. Just another tired man in the middle of the city. And he liked that. The address was handwritten on a piece of paper. A farm on the outskirts, dirt floor, old trees, loose dogs. When the car stopped, Traoré got out without saying anything. The house seemed quiet, but alive. Like an old body that still breathes with dignity. The door creaked. And then he saw him. José Mujica was sitting on a wooden bench, with a mug in his hand and his deep-set eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't get up immediately. He just observed, as if he recognized a face he had dreamed of for a long time. Traoré approached slowly. When they stopped face to face, there was a thick silence. No introductions. No formalities. Just the weight of two stories that, for some reason, knew they had crossed paths before they even started walking. Mujica spoke first. You arrived early. People like us tend to arrive late. Traoré smiled for the first time in days. He took the letter out of his pocket and placed it on the table beside him. She brought me here. The old man made a gesture with his hand, as if to say sit down, and went to the old stove, where the kettle was hissing slowly. He prepared a mate and handed it to him without looking directly at it. Then he sat down again, with the calm of someone who has learned that everything that matters in life happens slowly. They talked little that day. Enough. Mujica spoke about prisons, the humidity in the cells, and the friends who never returned. He said that power tastes sweet, but turns sour in the mouth of those who forget where it came from. And the hardest part was not resisting temptation, it was not letting it enter our hearts disguised as a mission. Traoré listened like someone drinking water after crossing the Sahel. There were no questions. He just listened. And between pauses, he thought about how the old man up front could be more lucid than any leader in a suit and an escort. When night fell, Mujica pointed to a room at the back of the house. Tomorrow you will see the ground. Before governing any people, you must walk where the earth still speaks. Traoré said nothing. He just nodded. That night, he lay down in a simple bed, smelling of old wood and heavy blankets. And he dreamed of a dirt road, with ancient footprints next to his, as if someone were walking along without making a sound. And for the first time, he didn't feel afraid of the path. The day dawned with a light mist, the kind that makes time seem suspended. The farm was silent, but alive. The sound of branches swaying, the distant barking of a dog, the smell of wet earth after a humid dawn. It was as if the world had stopped running for just a few hours. IBRAHIM Traoré left the room silently, boots off, stepping carefully on the wooden floor. The house seemed asleep, but on the porch, like the day before, Mujica was already there, wrapped in a worn coat, holding his mate as if holding onto a memory. The old man looked at the field ahead, unhurriedly, as if he saw things that did not yet exist. Traoré approached, sat down next to him and, for a while, they said nothing. Mujica broke the silence with a simple sentence. Did you dream? Traoré took a deep breath. I dreamed. Of footprints. And of wind. Lots of wind. The old man laughed, an almost imperceptible laugh. The wind speaks here. You just need to be patient to listen. They got up and walked towards the vegetable garden. Mujica pointed to the plants, explaining their quirks, the days when they didn't grow, the days when they exploded with green. He spoke as if he knew the land intimately, as if each leaf had a story to be respected. This one, he said, touching a row of arugula, was almost lost. I thought it wouldn't survive. But it came back. Sometimes we're like that too. You almost have to die to understand how to live. Traoré listened as if listening to time. He was present, but his mind returned to the north of Burkina Faso, to the tired faces, to the mothers who buried their children and still planted sorghum with calloused hands. There, among the lettuces and damp earth, he felt a kind of serene shame. Of having forgotten the ground in the midst of the battle. They stopped beneath an older tree, with a wide trunk and branches spread out like open arms. Mujica sat on the makeshift bench made of old planks and gestured for Traoré to join him. They stood there for a while, listening only to the sounds of the field. No words were urgent. No silence was uncomfortable. After a while, the old man began to speak. Not with the voice of one who teaches, but with that of one who remembers. When I was young, I thought I could change the world by force. That courage was enough. That being right was enough. But reason without tenderness turns to stone. And stone, my friend, doesn't listen to anyone. Traoré stared straight ahead. He didn't need to answer. I spent years in prison, Mujica continued. Years alone, listening only to my own thoughts. And do you know what kept me alive? It wasn't ideas. It was remembering the smell of the earth. The sound of rain on the tin roof. The taste of hot meat on cold mornings. These little things, they are where freedom lives. Traoré picked up a handful of dirt from the ground. He squeezed it between his fingers. It stained his palm. He watched the dark dust slide along the lines of his skin. I forgot about that, he said, almost in a whisper. Mujica nodded. They'll try to give you everything, Ibrahim. Planes, meetings, medals. They'll say you're the future. But the future isn't built in the air. It's born here, where we step. The young leader remained silent. Then he took the notebook he always carried from his pocket and wrote something. Mujica didn't ask what it was. He didn't need to. They returned home as the sun was beginning to rise. Before they went inside, the old man went to a corner of the porch, where there was a small wooden box. He took out a smooth stone, darkened by time. I've carried this with me since I was arrested. Not because it protects me, but because it reminds me that everything passes. The only thing that doesn't pass is what we build inside. He handed the stone to Traoré. The captain held it with both hands. It was light, but seemed to hold an ancient weight. A profound silence. A testament to survival. Keep it. Not as a relic, but as a reminder. That night the sky was clear. No clouds. The stars seemed closer. Traoré went to bed early, but he didn't sleep. He stared at the simple ceiling, listening to the crickets outside. The stone was next to it, on the table. And while the world spun outside, fast, cruel, distracted, he felt, for the first time in a long time, that he had found an axis. It wasn't the power. It wasn't the strategy. It was the land. And whoever listens to the earth, never returns the same. The last day arrived without warning. The sky was still dark when Traoré got up. The ground was cold under his feet, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. The house slept in silence, but he knew it was time to leave. He dressed slowly. He took the notebook with the notes from the previous days, the carefully folded letter, and the stone now living deep in his pocket as if it were part of his uniform. He walked to the balcony and found Mujica already there, as always, as if he had never left. This time, there was no mate in their hands. No smile. Just eyes fixed on the horizon. He'll be back, he said, without turning his face. Traoré nodded. Yes. And it will hurt. There was silence. Not the silence of those who have nothing to say, but of those who respect what is being felt. The weight of departure. The echo of experience that has not yet found words. Everything we learn with our hearts takes time to become words, Mujica added. But you will take it with you. And when the right moment comes, you will know what to say. Or what to keep quiet. They walked down the small dirt path together to the rusty gate. The same simple taxi from the first day was waiting for them. The driver was smoking a cigarette and staring at the steering wheel. Before entering, Traoré turned to the old man. I wanted to give you something. But I didn't bring anything. Mujica put his hand on his shoulder. You've already given me what I needed. You've shown me that there's still someone listening. That, to me, is already a miracle. Traoré took a deep breath. The air seemed denser there. Cleaner, but heavier to leave. He picked up the notebook, tore out one of the handwritten pages, and handed it to the old man. Mujica held it without reading. Read it when I'm gone. A handshake was the farewell. No promises. No plans. Just the acknowledgement that something important had happened and that, like all sacred things, it didn't need to be explained. The car drove slowly down the gravel road. Mujica remained there, standing still, with the sheet in his hand. Only after hearing the engine disappear into the wind did he sit back down on the wooden chair and open the paper. It was just a sentence. Everything strong begins silently. Traoré returned to Ouagadougou late in the evening. The heat greeted him as an uncomfortable reminder that the war was still going on. The dust in the air, the scarred faces, the urgency in every step. But something in him had changed. The same man who had left 3 days earlier came back with a different gait. Slower. More steady. The next day, instead of resuming his meetings with ministers, he visited a village in the interior. He sat on the ground with the elders. He ate with the children. He spoke little. He listened a lot. And that same night, at a meeting with young soldiers, he took the stone out of his pocket, placed it on the table and said, "This is worthless. It's just rock. But someone told me that sometimes we need to remember what weighs on us inside." No one understood it right away. But in that gesture, there was something new. A type of leadership that did not command, it called. That did not shout, it sowed. Days passed, and the letter was never mentioned again. But those who observed closely noticed small changes. The unannounced visits. The nighttime walks through the barracks. The silent meetings before decisions were made. And the look. A look that had crossed something beyond politics. Years later, when Mujica died, Traoré was on a mission. The whole world reacted with news reports, headlines, and solemn obituaries. But no official statement came from Burkina Faso. No statement to the press. Just a gesture. At the government headquarters, a stone was placed on the meeting table. No caption. No explanation. And days later, in a document lost in the official gazette, a sentence published in tiny font. Some men don't need to be remembered. They just need to be continued. And so, their story was never written in books. It was never recorded on video. It never made headlines. But she remained alive. In a notebook. On a stone. In the way a young African began to walk with more silence and more weight as someone who carries, within himself, not only the destiny of a nation, but the echo of an old man who, one day, taught him that the true revolution begins with the care of a plant, the respect for the land, and the commitment to not harden oneself, even when everything around us tries to turn us into stone. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this message and write in the comments what was on your heart. And if you believe that the world can still change through courage and simplicity, subscribe to the channel. Here we continue to tell stories that deserve to be remembered.